With the GDP steadily going down, the rising increase of civil wars and weakness in its currency, Pakistan is now on the brink of collapse. It is the 23rd largest economy in the world by purchasing power parity and is home to 230 million people who are currently in a situation sliding next to poverty. The kind of economic collapse currently happening in Pakistan is one of the most terrifying ones. In this video, we will be cracking down on something about this nation, what is making its economy fall, and how its government is trying to redeem itself. Just make sure that you are in with us till the end. Without further ado then, let's dive down to today's agenda. Beyond its potential for massive human suffering, there are economic issues that have been attracting a lot of economists to this country. Pakistan was worldly known for its influence and resilience on a lot of majors on a lot of economic events in the world. China recognizes Pakistan as its central figure in China's Belt and Road Initiative, providing both a trading route and a source of supplemental labor to the world's second largest economy. Pakistan also has one of the world's largest foreign workforces, with as much as 10% of the country's GDP being sent in from their workers abroad back home to their families. Most of these workers are primarily absorbed in places like the UAE, the cooperative Gulf states, and Saudi Arabia. Apart from those working in these Arab superpowers, many other Pakistani workers send billions of dollars to home every year from countries like the UK, Australia, the EU, and the USA. So, in short, the economic fate of this country has always been relying on its workforce. And that is not enough. This country has also often been viewed to have a kind of hostile relationship with India, a major economic power in the region that is also home to industries that are similar to those of Pakistan. Pakistan also ranks 6th in the world as one of the nations that produce nuclear power. So what is making its economy go down or fail? Now, this is a critical question that we'll be handling in this part. Now, before we start, allow us to introduce you to some logic. You've been seeing developing nations or low-income nations just continuing to suffer beyond normality. I know you have been dying a lot to know the answer to this state. For starters, it is saddening to note that in the near future, it will become even more difficult for such nations to borrow money from reputable institutions at reasonable interest rates, like advanced economies, that are often able to borrow money in their own currency, giving them much control over their debt burdens. Let's take a country like Japan, for example. Japan can sustain a level of government debt that is 300% of its national GDP because it borrows money in yen and is an extremely stable and widely recognized global currency. Japan even pays very low or sometimes negative interest rates on that money. Again, Japan is able to borrow money from its own citizens because it's home to a lot of very wealthy people. Japan is a more established economy. It also has trillions of dollars in other currency reserves, like US dollars. So investors have security knowing very well that they will always be able to pay their loans no matter how high their debt level gets. This is quite the opposite of Pakistan, which will find it very hard to borrow money from its population, of which almost 80% are not wealthy enough to satisfy the borrowing requirements of the government. To add insult to injury, international institutions all over the world see no sense to make loans denoted in Pakistani rupees, because there is a significant foreign exchange rate risk involved in dealing with a currency that is rarely used outside of Pakistan itself. Pakistan has therefore resorted to foreign currencies like the US dollar and the Chinese RMB. Here again, they find another problem. Taking loans using these foreign currencies would demand higher interest rates or political strings getting attached. Why? Because the countries that are making these loans are taking on significant risks that they will never be paid back. Having higher interest rates in a currency that the country has no control over opens it up to a lot of things that can go wrong, like its own currency being devalued, its exports no longer being demanded, or its growth not outpacing the interest rates it has charged. The advanced economies have continued to remain stable and ditched economic crises because of good political stability, good management, and generally a lower level of things like institutional corruption. Again, advanced economies also benefit from having highly value-added exports to offer the global economy. If Japan, for example, fell into an extended recession, it wouldn't be good, but the devaluation in their currency would make their global exports more competitive. Suddenly, everything from smartphones, container ships, and even tourism would be cheaper for international buyers. So, what would they do? They would sell more exports and welcome more tourists, which would help them self-correct the negative economic pressure. This would give them a consistent source of income that could help them pay off any debts at hand. If you compare this again to a country like Pakistan, and the devaluation of their currency hasn't quite had the same effect. The reason being, Pakistan has heavily been relying on imports to help keep its basic industries going. Also, by looking at what these industries produce, talk of products like rice and linens, which are considered the country's biggest exports, and by the nature of the world market, we can generously conclude that such products can't compete with similar ones produced by industries whose countries rank high in terms of economy. Those are just some of the basic reasons why Pakistan has been seeing it very tough in the economic sector. Alongside those deficits, the country has also been suffering from record floods that killed more than 1,700 people and added $30 billion worth of economic damage. These challenges had started to turn into crises as the government attempted to control the living costs for a financially vulnerable group of citizens by putting a cap on electricity and gas prices. Actually, this was a major expense for the government and businesses and led to shortages in the country's supply of fuel for cars and machines, and even the problem hitting entire regions, making them fall into rolling blackouts. In an attempt to reduce energy consumption, the government started to ban a lot of imports, especially non-essentials, in an attempt to slow the rate at which foreign exchange is leaving the country. But again, it also faced a slowdown in this motive because as it increased these restrictions more and more, people were trying to swap out their rupees for more globally recognized currencies before it was too late. The government has put further restrictions on how much individuals can transfer, which now led to the nation having 3 types of exchange rates. One is one that the central bank did recognize. The next one is the black market rate. And lastly is the rate that provides institutions adhering to government laws will exchange money at. To aid its recovery, some international institutions too have offered some support in the form of loans to give the country the cash it needs to restock its reserves and get back on track. And just as we mentioned before, such offers usually come with strings attached, like the IMF for example. The IMF has funded the country with billions of dollars in loans and even promised them more and more as long as the government made certain changes. The biggest one was to allow the country's currency to float freely in the foreign exchange markets, and this has been something that the Pakistani government never wanted or have been quite hesitant to approve. China has also come forward as a major lender to Pakistan, and it already has $30 billion in loans to the country, approximately 3 times out of the IMF. These loans were made as part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which was keen to include Pakistan as a convenient stopover for both shipping ways and railroads en route to Europe and the Middle East, which are very important partners to China. Again, since they may not be able to pay this loan in time, they will be very beneficial to China's road to help fulfill its less popular geopolitical ambitions. Also, China will now be expecting Pakistan to give its dibs to China's natural resource wealth to the industrial centers in China. Please, share with us your thoughts. What suggestions do you have on this? This brings us to the end of our video today. We thank you guys for saving your time to watch this video. If you found it interesting and informative, please don't forget to leave us a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.